Thanks for tuning in. How is everybody today? We'll allow some folks to come on in. We're doing the live Q&A a little early today. Doing the live Q&A a little bit early today. Working with some clients at the time and trying to make sure that time is constantly open, but sometimes it's more challenging. So today we're just going to be talking about relationship questions. I have a new video coming out. Tomorrow on can't stop thinking about them after the breakup. Why we can't stop thinking about them after a breakup. And the impact there is of that. So that'll be interesting. Should be good. And then there'll be another video that comes out for members of the site. Kind of a deeper dive that'll come out here. And I guess probably Monday. Probably Monday would be good. So that'll be good. And so all is good. And, it's interesting because when we talk about relationships and we talk about situations, we talk about the folks that we deal with in day-to-day life and all that great stuff, we have an impact of it, and it impacts us. And, I can start talking right now because I know that, we're doing this at a different time. So I'm not sure how many people got the memo. It was kind of a last-minute switch out. But, a lot of times we don't realize, the impact that our relationships have on us. We don't realize the impact that people have on us. We don't realize how we've had certain programs in our life, and that's something that we have to look at, and we have to address the program. We have to address the consistency. We have to address what we see over and over again. We have to start seeing the cycle patterns in our life. We just have to start understanding that, and it's, it's not a have to, but it's it's kind of a great thing to do it. Yeah. And sometimes we get overwhelmed and we're like, I don't know if I want to take all this on. And I agree with that. I understand it's a lot to take on all at one time. But what I've realized is that we learn and we grow from it, and we learn from a lot of things about ourselves, which is so powerful. And we wouldn't learn that unless we actually start looking at those types of things that we probably didn't see before. But when we begin to step back, and so the video coming out is about, why you can't stop thinking about your ex. And I know that most people, when they break up, they can't stop thinking about them. What are they doing? Where are they going? Are they seeing someone else? Do they miss me? Do they not? That sort of thing. And that's understandable. I mean, that's how we are. But the problem is that we're deflecting. Each and every time we do that, we're deflecting away from our own needs, wants, desires, thoughts, feelings, pain, progress, any of that. We're deflecting from that. And we're kind of just focusing on them. And many of us have been trained to do that. We've been trained to do that in our life. We've been trained to worry about other people. And even if they broke up with us, we're worried, how are they okay? Are they feeling okay? How are they feeling? How are they doing? And those are the questions we have to sit there and think about. Why do we do that? And many of us have been programmed. When I look back at, the family dynamic, and I look at a lot of my clients' family dynamics, many of us have some of the similar dynamics, and those dynamics flow with us throughout our adult life until we actually manage them, until we actually realize they exist. Right? We gotta realize they exist. Then we gotta work to work on them. We gotta be honest with ourselves. We gotta work on it. There's a lot of work that we have to do. We have to unpack some stuff. We gotta accept that, and then we gotta see, the consistencies, the repetitions. We learn from it. We grow from it. But then we figure out, what part do we play in the situation? Like in any relationship, we all play a part. Some of us are more of the giving. Some of us are more giving of ourselves. Some of us aren't. Some of us allow other people to take over because we want to make them happy. And there's so many different levels to this to really understand. And that's where I really think that we have to look at these different levels and understand exactly what that means and how to really see things for what it is. And that's important. And that's realistic and that's honest. And I'm going to be answering some questions here in just a couple of minutes. And so definitely if you have some questions going and, put them in the chat and I will work on addressing those for sure. It's just like, we've all been in multiple relationships, and these relationships sometimes can look very similar. But one of the things that's more similar than even the relationship of the person is ourself and how we interact in the relationship. How we deal with the relationship, how we give or whatever we do that's very similar. And then the situation that takes place on the back end, how they respond usually can be very similar, even if the people are very different. And I find it interesting too when people say, oh, well, my ex was this way or whatever. But it's interesting how, somebody might be very different as far as outside appearances or the way they respond, but internally they can be very similar. And so when people say, well, I need to be trained on all cluster B, train me on all cluster B, so I never ever I never pick a narcissist, I never pick somebody that has BPD tendencies, I never pick that, just train me on all of that so I know from a mile away what I'm dealing with. And I respect that, but better yet, why don't we get a good beat on those types of things? And then on the back end, let's just figure out who we are, create our values, understand our values, create what we believe in, create that as us as the individual, as the entire identity, use those to create our boundaries, use those to live by. And then when somebody does something outside of that, it's a red flag. It's like, whoa, wait, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right, right? This is so there's something wrong with this. This seems wrong. It seems off. There's something wrong with this. And that's what I want us to kind of think about, because it's like we can learn all the signs and symptoms, and that's great. But sometimes, we all have what I would consider a blind spot. And many of those blind spots are based on what? They're based on how we were raised and the people that we lived amongst. And because we thought that was regular, normal, everything, whatever. And we didn't realize the issue involved, right? And so when you're around it long enough and other people come around you with those types of tendencies, it kind of goes under the radar, right? It's our first initial reaction is probably to feel more at home than to feel repelled, right? So something to really think about. So let's look at some of the questions and comments. Let's start off here today. Shooter McGavin, 18. I love that name. That's great. I love the film. Adam Sandler. That's a great film. Hi, Ashley. You've been a great help for me figuring out that my wife had BPD. Now ex-wife, thank God, LOL. Well, I'm glad that you've been able to move on. And that can be very challenging. And yes, you're right. We can't save other people. We have to save ourselves. And, there's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. We can all work to better ourselves and to work on ourselves on a daily basis, to change the programming, no matter what the programming is, because you know how I feel about that. But if somebody's not willing to get help for themselves, that's a totally different situation. And we have to be able to realize that our life really does depend on us really focusing on bettering ourselves and doing what we need to do for our own growth. And if the other person plans on growing with us and moving up with us and doing that stuff, that's great. It's excellent. But if they're not, and they're holding us back from being able to have joy, and we're going through a constant beatdown at home, and we're not being able to express ourselves or have our own emotions, that's kind of the moment where you have to start thinking, how much longer can I handle this? Will this person actually get some help and work on themselves? And then after you've exhausted all opportunities and turned over all rocks, then we have to eventually move on. Rahul Roy, good to hear from you. Can people with BPD physically hurt others as revenge? I think anybody has the potential of hurting other people, especially for revenge. But I feel sometimes that if somebody's demonstrating signs and symptoms of BPD, yes, could they hurt somebody with revenge? Yes. Could they hurt somebody in the need of revenge? Also, it could be more of a fear factor, creating fear in the other person. I mean, people do that too, right? They might say that they're going to hurt you or allude to things, and it could be just fear based. It could be anger based, just strict on anger that they cannot control their anger. Maybe they're more bark than bite, which is usual for most people because they can't control what comes out of their mouth. But I think anybody's capable of revenge. It kind of depends on how they've told you that they're going to do it, or if they've said that, or what they've expressed to you on that. Um, Shooter McGavin, the only way to see things for what they are is to get space from them, at least for me. And I get it. Sometimes we need space. Sometimes, well, we always need space. If we're not in an environment where we feel like we're being heard, if we're in an environment where there's a lot of confusion and misunderstandings and we don't really know what's going on, we either have to get clarity while we're there, or we have to step back and understand how to get clarity. Because without clarity, we can't make a good decision. Without clarity and peace of mind, we make bad decisions. It's like the same idea as making big decisions when you haven't slept. That's a really bad idea. Okay, it's a really bad idea because you are not going to make the right decision. You're not going to think through it clearly enough and make the right decision. And so, yes, getting some space, especially when you need it and you're feeling like you're being suffocated in a situation, you definitely need to do. Marina, good to hear from you. Mine won't let me get space and won't cooperate in a divorce. My daughter even says it's toxic. What do I do to get him? Okay, to get him to do, like, to get him to get a divorce, or to want to leave. What do I do to get him to want to leave? Okay. That's interesting. Okay, he won't cooperate and he won't give you the divorce. Well, yeah, that's actually that's actually not an unusual situation to be in. It's actually kind of usual for many people. They've stated that they want space. They've stated that they need to have a break. They've stated that they want to have a divorce. And even though the other person acts basically like they don't even want to be in the marriage, they don't want to get it because of the fear of abandonment. And that's hard because now you're kind of looking at it and you're saying, okay, you're unhappy in the marriage and it's not working, but yet you don't want to leave it because of your core wounds. So we look at that and we realize that it's toxic in that fact too, that the relationship's really based on attachment style and attachment based on core wounds instead of unconditional love, right? And I know that you know that, so that's why you're wanting to move on. The thing is that a lot of times people in this situation will step out of the marriage, but I don't really agree with that because usually when you step out of the marriage or you take on another relationship, it's really too soon during the situation anyway, because we haven't had any space and we've been surrounded by the situation, that we really do need space and clarity. And I really do think that a year is at least the optimal time to really get space and clarity to understand ourselves. But I think that you're going to have to probably go on, and if you haven't already, you're going to need to go to a lawyer and serve papers. I mean, there's not much ways around it. He can't keep you from getting a divorce. Somebody can't lock you into a marriage. I'm not sure if you've gone to do that so far. But a lot of times too in these situations, if somebody's been asking for a divorce multiple times, but we really haven't followed through, he might feel like this is just another time of those, just another time that you want a divorce and you're not really being serious. Sometimes you just gotta do it. You gotta follow up with it. And that might be something that you need to go in and speak to a lawyer if you haven't already. That's probably the best situation. And I don't know if there's a financial predisposition as well, but I would definitely speak to a lawyer, go on and file if you haven't already, and see what happens. Rahul Roy, is there any conclusive medical evidence at what age BPD actually develops in a person? Well, I think, I there's a lot of scientific studies. Um, and you have to look at, there's lots of things that can happen. So it could be BPD, it could be a genetic predisposition. According to the DSM-5, it could be diagnosed as early as at 12 years old. Diagnosis, right? Development. I mean, I think development, depending on is it genetic or is it environmental, can be interesting as well. So that's the big question, right? There's a lot of questions. Is BPD? Is it all genetic, or environmental? And so that's a question. Um, there's been some studies that say that it's been shown that 42% of variation in BPD is caused by genetics. 58% is caused by other factors, such as environmental. But also suggests that BPD is fairly strongly related to genetic causes. So you have to look at both sides. So if it's genetic, it would actually develop in the person. It would be there at birth, right? If it's genetic. If it's environmental, I feel like when we talk about like core wound developments, I think core wound developments, I think is that 24 months. I mean, let's see, core wound developments. What age? Let's see. Because I think it's like right about the age of 2 or maybe 3, something like that. Because remember that our core wounds. So when we're young, it comes out when we're really young. So for example, I've had clients that I've worked with that, remember when we're trying to figure out how something began, like fear of rejection. And going back to, and they can go back to when they were very, very young and remember like feeling rejected by mother or dad in a situation, or fear of abandonment, where they can remember back when they were young, maybe 4 years old, even younger sometimes, even maybe a little older, where something happened where they were left alone and they couldn't find their parents, whatever, and it was. As a child, it's earth shattering because remember, this is like very, when we're kids, everything's black and white. When mom or dad's not there, they've left us. They've gone forever. Right? We don't know the difference. We don't know. Oh, okay. Yeah. We don't know. We're not 4 years old and go, oh yeah, they get off work at 6:30 p.m. They'll be home at 7 when they take the train home. No, we don't think about that. We just know that we're here. We woke up and nobody was there. And so everybody must have left us. Also like when a parent leaves or moves out or, gets thrown in jail or just takes off and stops taking care of, or when one family member, different things, this can inspire these core wounds, which I think can inspire also, if it's not genetic, can inspire environmental contribution to cluster B dynamic. Right. So I guess that's a long answer to your question. But I feel like, so, obviously genetic day one, environmental can take over time. And then there's, spectrums of it as well, gray area. Samasis, good to see you. How are you doing? Hi, your videos help me understand a lot about BPD. I'm just out of a relationship with a BPD woman, but I can't perform physically now. I think my heat is weak. What do I do? Okay, so I'm wondering how much of your mental mindset is still on that other person that you broke up with that shows signs and symptoms of BPD. Because usually this is not rare, by the way, and I'm always going to tell you if something's unique. Like if I haven't heard of something, this is not unique, so do not be scared. This is not a unique. This is something that happens to a lot of people. I'm not downplaying it. I'm just saying, don't worry. You're not the only person this has happened to. Okay. So, I think that your mind is still on this other person. I think that, you still are kind of hung up a bit emotionally on this other person. And I think that's why you're having trouble, physically performing at this point. And so I think if you ask yourself that question, what is it that how do you still feel about that person? What's still going on in your head about that person? How often are you thinking about them? Because if you're wrapped up emotionally, and I'm not sure how your sex life was with them or how much that made up the relationship, which would also be an interesting question to ask as well. But I think that's very normal. And that usually means that we're still kind of mentally stuck on someone. Tamsin, great to see you. How are you doing? I can totally relate to this. Sometimes we just have to take care of ourselves. It's not selfish to put yourself first to enable you to move forward. We need to feel strong enough within ourselves if we are ever to support and help others. I agree. Well, we also have to love ourselves unconditionally, and that's a hard deal. That's not an easy thing to do. That's like, it's like the end all be all prize that we can try to we work at. And it's something that I've been working at for a very long time because we're unable to love other people unconditionally until we figure out how to do it for ourselves. And some people say, oh, that sounds so selfish. Well, no, actually, it's selfish to not work at it because if we don't work at it and we don't love ourselves unconditionally, what happens here? We don't love others unconditionally. We make judgment calls. We put our blame and suffering on other people, that sort of thing that creates problems in our life, right? And so that becomes a big deal. And I thank you so much for reaching out, Tamsin. Why not? Thank you for reaching out. Is it common for a toxic partner to act like their partner is the one who has mental illness when they want to date another, going as far as to have them hold against their will for 72-hour hold? Wow. Okay. Is it common for a toxic partner to act like their partner is the one who has mental issues when they want to date another? Oh, wow. Okay. So basically putting it on someone else. So saying that you have the problem, there's something wrong with you. And then going a step further is to like basically having you detained so that they can get away with whatever they want to. I mean, that's wow. That's pretty deep. But yeah, I mean, I've seen some stuff, and I've seen people go to a lot of different degrees and levels to try to get the other person to believe that they have the problem, not the problem, that they're the issue. But also there's multiple folds for that, right? The first one is that if I get you to believe that you have the problem, you'll also get me to believe that you have the problem, and then I don't really have to look within myself, right? So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The second thing is that I don't know if it's constant. I think sometimes with the narrative that's created in some people's minds, they begin to believe the narrative of that, the other person has the problem because it makes it easier on them, and then they don't have to look at themselves. Because it can be very scary for someone to look at themselves and see that they actually need to work on themselves. And I always find that interesting. Brief, soapbox caveat is that I feel like a lot of people are worried about working on themselves, and and they're worried about what they're going to find. And it's just what I figured out working through my stuff and helping others is that usually, what we find is nothing crazy, or it's actually quite enlightening. Some of it we're like, oh, it's scarier than it is. It's like not knowing. It's kind of like the idea of, well, you wonder, are you pregnant or you not? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's two options, and we can sit there and worry the whole time about it, or we can just find out. And eventually we got to find out anyway. And so I think that's always interesting. But yes, I think somebody could go to extreme to do that. And I think some of it might be conscious, manipulation. Some of it might be subconscious manipulation. Zen and me, great to see you. How are you doing? Let's see. CK Lux, how do I tell wife I believe she has BPD and needs therapy, afraid to because of expected reaction? Woo! That's a loaded question. And Gringayo, by the way, if you can ask me that question again, because I'm confused as to what your question was, if you don't mind resending me the question. But CK, how do I tell wife I believe she has BPD and needs therapy? Ooh, wow. Okay. First off, I think I would bridge the gap with having communication and I don't know how your communication is. I'm assuming it's challenged. But assuming that it's challenged and that you've watched videos and you've done your due diligence and you believe that yes, indeed, signs and symptoms are pretty much match. I think the first step to make would maybe folks are usually not, if they don't think that they have an issue or have anything to work on, they're not going to want to go to therapy. They're not going to want to go to coaching. They're not going to want to go to marriage counseling. And what I found though is it might be better to either say, hey, let's go together. Maybe we need to get some counseling together. Or if you take the first step and maybe working with somebody as well, because, if we're in a relationship with somebody with BPD, there's a reason why we got in this relationship and probably some things that we need to work on as well. Also, what it does is it shows that you're going to take the leadership role and actually take care of yourself. Because of what I've realized that if indeed somebody might be displaying these signs and symptoms, if you say that they need to do this, this could be overwhelming and they could take this extremely personal. They could see this as you're judging them, labeling them. And sometimes somebody's going to come out, fighting on this. So I think if you shared maybe some content, that might be good. But we have to be careful with saying, I think you're this. Because we really need them to see the light, right? We need them to see the light, to see that they need to work on that. And what I've realized is that they need to come to terms with the understanding of that. So if they can come to terms with the understanding of that, that could be very interesting. But if we try to tell them what we think they need to do, if we try to tell them what we think they need to do, usually that's not going to end up very good for us. So I think bridging the gap, if you can open up the lines of communication, if you can say maybe some positive things about the person and see how they go from there, and then say, I'm thinking, and maybe you take the reins of saying, hey, I'm thinking about going and seeing somebody to work on myself. Maybe, maybe that's something that you might be interested, or maybe we could go together. Also, what I found too is that if somebody really doesn't know that this is going on or is not willing to accept it, they're probably not going to work with a coach or a therapist in a full, complete honesty as far as speaking about what's really happening, because they're not really seeing it for what you're seeing it as. You see what I'm saying? So it's not like there's a possibility that they're not lying, they're not manipulating. They just don't see the same situation because they're coming at it from a different standpoint, creating their own narrative. So if they were to go in and work with somebody, they might not even talk to that person and tell them what's going on. Again, they could actually make it out that you might be the person with an issue because maybe they see it that way. And so really, honestly, my answer to that question is, if you really want to get them help, if you can find someone that you can work together, okay, so that you're there in the presence of it as well and being able to steer a little bit of it, that could be a lot better. Also, the fact that you're saying you want to go as well might prompt somebody to feel like they're not being attacked. Okay, let's see. Samanas, thanks. I guess I'm still stuck in the head with that person. Yes, and that's the key, is that and that's something that might be helpful. I have a video coming out tomorrow on overcoming, how we can start working on not thinking about the ex. And it might be something that could be very powerful for you, because until we let go of that, it's really hard to move on. And, depending on the emotional connection and the psychological connection, it can be very hard. And so, yeah, maybe watching that video might be helpful, but being aware of that and seeing how often are you thinking about that person, really catch how often you deflect into thinking about her, right? Or, and that's something that could be interesting. Gringayo, yes, people don't like to change themselves. It's hard. And yes, change is hard. I mean, I'm the first one to agree with that. I mean, nobody wants to change. Because, change is challenging, and change takes work, and we have to be willing to do the work. And that's something that I want you to think about, is that, yeah, long term, when we're looking at what we're dealing with folks, and we're going through the process, we have to change, and working on how do we change. I mean, how do we walk through this? How do we allow ourselves to change? But the change is hard because it's the programming. When we've been programmed by certain things our whole life, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, do you know how hard that is to move past that? Do you know how hard that is to basically change that entire dynamic, and move forward in a different way? Because what happens is, and I know that many of you have been there, when you do the opposite or different from what you've done in the past, what happens? The brain starts creating this reality that something's wrong, right? The brain will create reality that, oh my God, you've made a bad decision, or this is wrong, or whatever that looks like. And so all in all, we'll second guess ourselves. And we have to be consistent. So we have to be consistent over time to basically break those chains of the programming. And that's why it's so hard, right? That's why when we look at the situation as it is with our lives, we have to take on one thing at a time. And we have to realize, what is it that I want to take on? And what am I willing to work on? And because we can't take everything on. I've had people that say, well, I want to take on this. I want to reduce I want to stop drinking. I want to get out of this toxic relationship. I want to stop smoking. I mean, good night. I mean, that's a lot to take on. We've got to take on one thing at a time, right? And I think that's something that we have to really look at. The P&D perspective. I like that name. You have the word perspective. Perspectives. My show is called Live Your True Life Perspectives. That's a good question. Is the vagus nerve tied to burnout? Is it tied to anything else psychological? That's a big question, and I don't know enough on that to really. I know some, but yes, it's tied to the sympathetic activity. I think during burnouts, in a middle workday kind of thing. But that, I don't know enough on that to adjust that. I know some, but I know that there's probably people that know a lot more than I know on that. But yes, there's a connection between burnout, and that's something to think about. And burnout in general, when we think about burnout, yeah, I think that nerve is tied to it. I think there's other stress points, personality traits, environmental issues that also go with that. But I'd love to give you a better answer on that. I think there might be someone that might be better at answering that. And let me think about who that might be. But good question nonetheless. And yes, it is tied to it for sure. I also believe that burnout is tied. It's directly reflective on many of our health consequences as well. I also think that burnout, cognitive dysfunction as well. So there's a lot of different angles there. Let's see. Rahul, is BPD a ground for divorce in the United States? In many Asian countries and India, the law hardly gives a damn about BPD. Mostly it blames men for not being up to the mark to live with BPD. I think anything gives grounds to divorce. I mean, I've even seen people take grounds for divorce based on political differences. So I think that there's a lot of grounds, but I think, my biggest thing is that if you can't communicate and your spouse is unable to communicate with you, and you're unable to communicate your emotions and needs, that's grounds for a divorce. And one of the biggest things too is that, we have to look at it. If somebody's just not willing to get help and really focus on themselves, that's grounds for divorce too. I don't like to defined so much, because I think that there's a lot of folks out there that have really, I think there's some people out there really working on themselves. They're really working really hard. They're working on cognitive behavior. They're working with a coach. They're working with a therapist. They're working on themselves on a constant basis. And I think that you have to give kudos to those people. But I think somebody that's unwilling to work on themselves and unwilling to grow and grow with the relationship, or unable to accept your reality, vice versa, I think that's grounds. I do think that the law system is quite behind when it comes to these types of things. When you're dealing with folks that show some of these cluster B signs, I think that we're really behind. I think in every country, including the United States. When you're dealing with cases with full on covert narcissists or narcissism, again, the courts don't really see that or talk about that, and I think that's kind of sad, because it really is. I think there's a large portion of our society that demonstrate these signs and symptoms, a lot larger portion than they've ever really talked about. And I think that, also, if you really look at lots of folks in power, they show some of the signs and symptoms of this, right? So it's like, it's interesting how it's not really looked at in divorce court or even in like corporate settings, understanding that dynamic. Let's see. Shooter McGavin, mine used the therapist as a weapon to say what was wrong with me. Yeah, I mean, if you're not willing to take responsibility for your actions and you're not willing to take responsibility for what you're doing, you're going to try to push blame on the other person, right? And so that's probably what happened with you. Marina, Monday appointment with lawyer, tomorrow protective order, follow up with it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You got it. I'm happy to help, because we can't live our lives for other people. We can't sit there and wait, because you know what it's like. You've waited for this person before. Okay, you've waited for them to do the right thing before, and they've shown you that they can't step up to the plate. They've also shown you that they're going to keep you waiting and walking on eggshells to, and you hope and pray that you do the right thing or say the right thing to get them to do it. But, in general, it's about, we finally have to just take it in our own hands, take the leadership role, and basically demand what we want. And that's really the only way. And I think you're doing a great thing. And I'd love to keep me abreast of what's going on, because I am happy that you are taking responsibility and living your life. And it can be challenging and hard and scary, because some people we've been programmed. Some of us have been in this relationship because we were programmed at a young age that we want to give and give and give and give till it hurts, because hopefully that person will be there to help us, or they'll be there for us, or they'll love us more because we did all this stuff. And so when we get in these relationships, we sit around and wait, and this person's future faking on us, telling they're going to do this, they're going to take care of that, and they never do. And we get there holding the bag, and this is constant. And we're just waiting to live our life. And right now, as of this moment, we have this one life to live. As of this moment, we want to use it to the best of our ability. We don't want to be waiting for somebody for a year and a half, 2 years to finally make a decision, or for them to move on. It's like, it's time. And I think that's important. So hooray for you. I know it's stressful and scary, but you know what? This is a learning curve. It's an opportunity to learn, and let's move on so that you can start living your life. Rich S., good to see you. How are you doing? Hello, Ashley. You're an amazing person. Really appreciate your advice on so many topics, such as getting out of a roommate situation with your spouse. Change is hard, but your approach advice is helpful. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate you reaching out. Yeah, I mean, the roommate situation is out of control right now. Okay, like, people can sit there. It's funny, a lot of us are like, we judge our marriages, or we judge our life, or some folks out there that are single judge their life. Oh, I wish I was married. But there are so many folks right now in a marriage that it has become the roommate situation. And this is it's across the board. It's around the world, it's around the world. And it's like being able to see it, understand it, recognize it, open the lines of communication, even when it's overwhelming, because, we got there for a reason. We got there because we didn't have the lines of communication open. We got there because slowly but surely we were shutting down for whatever reasons there are. And it's like being able to open those lines of communication is powerful. Being able to see it, being able to make those changes and move forward. It's not easy. It's something, some people find it crippling. They can't even do it. They would rather just live in this roommate situation than rock the boat. But, some of us step up to the plate and say, I can't handle this anymore. I want to have more. I thought this was going to be more. I want more. I expect more because this is what I want. And when we begin to realize our desires, our needs, and our values, we begin to create that reality. Thank you so much for reaching out, Rich. I appreciate you very much. Green guy, change is a choice. We humans are powerful. When we really want, we can do it, and it's good. It's progress. It's progression. Yes, for sure. That's what's so great about it, is that when we really want to change, we do it. And see, that's why I say we can't change other people, because we can't. And we can want them to change so badly, but they don't need, I mean, if they don't want to change, they're not going to change. They're not going to change. And the more and more we push them to change, the more and more they're going to resist the change. And the more and more we're going to get resentful for them resenting the change and resisting the change. And so that's really the key. And I've also realized too, we can't live their life. It's not our life to live. We can show them where the water is. We can show them where the food is. But if they're not willing to eat or drink, there's nothing we can do about it. And sometimes it's like we got to stop making the food and pouring the water. Sometimes we got to let them do it too. It's just like after a while, it sits out there, it gets stale. You've tried so many times. Make them try to do it. Put it in their hands. And, it comes a time, and we can't sit there and say, I'm putting this in your hands. I'm done with this. It's like, I'm done. And it's like looking at ourselves. What can we do in our lives to change? And what I've realized is that in any challenging relationship you're in, it takes two to tango. And any positive, healthy relationship, it takes two to tango. And so if we begin the change maker, if we become the leader and the change maker, we become a powerful force. Now that other person might not change or get better or work on themselves, but we begin to get better. We begin to work on ourselves. And all of a sudden, the great divide between you and this person actually kind of becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it's very obvious, right? And there's no second guessing or questioning. It's just obvious, because at the state of mind that you've gone to and the amount of growth that you've made, it's impossible to stay in the situation. Now, some of you will be the leader and you'll inspire the other person to start learning about themselves and growing. And that can mend a relationship in its own too, which is very powerful. But we have to make change for ourselves, not change for others. Totally agree. Thanks for that comment. Shooter McGavin, yes, but BPDs don't have the tools for change most of the time, it seems like. I think that everybody has the tools for change, but I think that the programming is so deep sometimes with folks because the programming, once we see it, it's kind of like the wake-up call, right? You've gotten a wake-up call. You get the wake-up call in the morning, or you set the alarm. Let's just say you set your alarm on your phone. We can either choose to wake up, we can choose to snooze, or we can choose to turn it off and stay in bed. I think that all of us are given tools. It's just that some patterns and some programming is just so deeply ingrained, it's so hard to see. And I've also seen too that when we're around people that placate us and allow us to do what we do, it's detrimental. And so I think that a lot of times, whether it's been people that have had reinforcement to do that, folks that have been placated, folks that have been, that sort of thing. It's like, we have to step back. And when we're in certain relationships with certain folks, and if we're displaying signs of codependency, we're aiding and abetting in the problem in its own, right? And so we're just another person in their life that's allowing them to play this role. And I've realized that we're not doing anybody a service by trying to fill someone's void for them. We're not doing anybody a service by trying to make someone happy. We can add to the quality of someone's life. We can offer them joy by being around us, but in the end, we cannot make anybody happy. We can't make anybody loved. We can't make anybody happy. It's really all up to us. It's all up to them. And so I think that, yes, you're right. Sometimes there's more tools that we have, but I also think that we all have access to a lot of the tools. I think we do. And I've seen some miraculous things happen, but people have to, it's like you have to find the wherewithal within you to find the value system to say, I'm going to go and work on myself at all costs, no matter how much pain it causes me, even though really the pain was there when we weren't working on ourselves. It's very interesting. It's like the pain all happened in the beginning, and then the work. Yes, are there some moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, or that happened, or oh God, I can't believe I did that. But at the same point, hey, it's still there. It was lingering anyway. And now we're able to understand the motives of why we did it. And now we're able to connect the dots when before maybe we thought it was a random situation or we made a choice for that situation when it was really not random at all. Rahul, do folks with PPT ever realize their wrong sense of entitlement? My wife feels she deserves everything on a plate, and I'm responsible to raise her all her life. Literally, she is impossible to talk to. That is a challenge. And I wish I could say you're the first person I've heard you ever say that. I mean, I would have a lot of money actually if I had like $5 for every time I heard this. I'd actually be doing financially probably pretty well. Yeah, okay. The entitlement aspect of the programming is so challenging to overcome. Because, see, think about the entitlement. If I believe I'm entitled, I don't believe that I have to do anything. If I believe I'm entitled, I don't have to work. You have to work. And if I'm entitled, then I believe that everything you get is mine. Right? So then what do I have to do? And so it takes me out of the position of having to act or do, and I become the person automatically is entitled to what you have. And that's challenging. And it's not going to change until they awaken to that, but it's normally not going to change until you let go of it. Because usually in that situation, you have to make changes and boundaries. I don't know about the credit card situation or the spending situation at your home. You see what I'm saying? Because we need to look at those types of boundaries. We need to look at those types of boundaries, and we need to create those types of boundaries. And it's very important. We need to figure out how to start creating that, because the entitlement means I have everything everything that's yours is mine. Everything that's mine is mine. And, when you start creating these financial boundaries, if things start working out a little better and she starts calming down and spending less, that's great. If not, you're going to have to put some other boundaries up, and then you're going to have to decide how much longer do you want to pay for her life. I mean, I know some folks out there that I don't personally work with, but they've been paying even for their ex for years. I don't work with these folks, but paying for their ex for years, paying for their ex-wife for years after. And so we have to think about that, because eventually, all we're doing is, we're enabling that person to continue to believe that reality. And I don't know if you have children together, and that's another step to it too. It's like we have to look at that, because, and if she's impossible to talk with, which is usually the way that somebody entitled will, because they don't want to hear the other side of it, they cut you off and they get angry and they start things so that you'll drop the comments, you'll drop the argument, you'll drop the discussion, so they don't have to listen to it. Super Cold 007 came across your videos recently. It really helped me out a lot. Just wanted to say thank you. Very knowledgeable lady. I imagine you are helping absolute thousands of others too. Thank you so much for reaching out. It means a lot to me. For your message, and I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you're here. Keep coming back to the live shows, and anything, any questions that you have or comments or thoughts you have, let me know, and any video content that you'd like me to talk about as well. Thank you again. Let's see. I can answer a few more questions. I have a client here in 10 minutes. Let's see. Green Gryo, people need to find something of value to change for. Yes, the value that they need to change for is the value within themselves, the value of their life. The only way we're going to honestly change is if we actually see the value within us living here in this life, in this dimension, and know our value. We have to start embarking that, and that's the only real reason for change. Changing for somebody else doesn't work. Shooter McGavin, how can you choose to wake up if you don't hear the alarm? Well, the alarm is there. It's hard. I mean, you have to be listening for it. You have to be super mindful for it. People do not work on their brain programming. I mean, I listen to what's going in and out of my brain all day. I'm aware of it. I actually practice mindfulness. I actually get aware of any comments that are flowing in my brain. I worked on eliminating my negative broken record over 12 years ago. I figured this out. This is stuff that I work on with clients, right? So you got to be willing to actually do the work. And the work is, if I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling angry, it's not like I'm pumping in air that's depressed air. It's what is it? It's my thoughts, right? It's my thoughts. And so if I start managing my thoughts and start understanding that, I begin to get insight into my own psyche. I begin to get insight into things that I need to work on. And I think everybody has a wake-up call. It's just some of us just don't want to hear it because it's too painful. It's too scary. It's too overwhelming. It's too much work. And I think that's what it is. And I understand. But I think that if we sit there and say that some people don't have the tools, I think that's actually allowing them to continue on in the same facet, which is also we're enabling again, when in reality, I really think everybody has the tools. It's just, are you willing to take the time to work on it? And some situations are more challenging than others. But I think that we still have it. I think that's a great question. Okay, so let's see. I can answer a couple more questions. It looks like only love is real. I just got mad at him and broke no contact. I got triggered and I accused him of things he said to me. He's acting like he is destroyed. Well, breaking no contact is challenging. I'm not sure who made the no contact. That's something too. But, breaking the no contact is challenging if you got triggered. But then my biggest question is, what triggered you? That's a good question. What triggered you? Because if you can journal on that, what triggered you? What upset you? Because whatever triggered you is emotionally connected with you. We want insight into ourselves. And the more insight we can get, even if it's somebody triggering us, is very powerful because this allows us to understand why we got triggered in the first place. It also allows us to start, peeking into our brain and understanding more of where we are. Mike Oxlong. Hey Ashley, my friend Nick loves your content. Could you shout him out? His name is Nick Gurr. He'd really appreciate it. Hey Nick, thanks a lot. I appreciate you digging on my content. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for reaching out here on the live talk. I appreciate both of y'all, and thank you for tuning in. Let me know of any content that you would like me to talk about, or any sort of video content you'd like me to make. Thanks again, Mike. Thanks again, Nick. Great to see y'all. Let's see. Kirsten, I'd love to see more content about managing BPD relationships between siblings. My sister is the family member. Oh yeah, that's a great one. Okay, yeah. That's a great one. I'll write that down. That can be challenging. Yeah, family members, siblings with BPD. Yes, I will do something on that for sure. That can be very challenging. Understanding that dynamic and being able to create the boundaries that we need in those dynamics is powerful. So yes, thank you, Kirsten. I appreciate that. It's a great idea. So managing BPD relationships between siblings. Marina, I wasted so many years trying to figure it out, but insanity cannot be rationalized. Totally agree. Walking on eggshells is easy. Tiptoeing around crazy. Now that takes talent. That's very true. Very well said. Mark Anthony, why do women say yes, I forgive you, but I'll never forget? When Christ says your sins are eternally forgiven and thrown to the utmost depths of these. Why do women say yes, I forgive you, but never forget? I don't know. I think if you never forget and you never let go. Now this depends. So this is a slippery slope, and I have 4 minutes left. So this is a slippery slope. I'm big on forgiveness. I think you have to forgive, but I think sometimes when people forget, they forget and they go back into the programming and do it over again. Now, if somebody supposedly forgave you but keeps bringing it up, that's a different story. You can't forgive somebody and keep bringing it up. You can remember it within your consciousness, but I think if you're really going to forgive somebody, you have to let it go. Now, you don't have to put blinders on and act like it doesn't exist and never happen and do it over again. But I think that, yes, forgiveness does not mean bringing it up, throwing it back into someone's face over and over again. Especially if somebody was honest and truthful and put out some information that they didn't really want to share, and now they're being judged on it. I think that's something that we have to really recognize, because I think that sometimes when people come clean and are honest, they still get challenged, and they get in a painful situation because the other person never lets it go. Mike, perfect. Thank you so much for tuning in, Mark Anthony. It's Marco. I figured. It's good to see you, Marco. How are you doing? Great to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. Kirsten, thank you. It's very challenging. Yes, I totally understand that, and we're going to get some video content out for that. It's challenging because, you know what, it's the family dynamic as well, and it's been going on for a long time, and there's a lot of triggers, and families act differently. And, I'm sure mom and dad, if mother and dad are still alive, they act differently around your sister, and that whole situation. There's a lot of walking on eggshells. There's a lot of resentment. I understand that, Marina. If you're genuine with your apology, then you deserve to not hear about it again. And I agree with that. It's like when we deal with situations and circumstances, when we've apologized, I think it's important. But there's some people out there though that apologize over and over again. But they do the same thing again. So you know what I'm saying? Dealing with certain folks, it's like they'll do something, they'll apologize, you accept it, and then the next day they're doing it again. So I think that's the only caveat that we have to represent, is that some people were doing the crazy making, right? We're walking through that type of lifestyle. But if it's something that's genuine and has been let go of, if somebody is holding you on, like I call forever ammunition, is what I've actually coined it as many years ago. If somebody's using forever ammunition on you, that is something that you need to be aware of, because forever ammunition is a manipulative tactic. Forever ammunition means I'm never going to let you live down something. No matter how long we go, I'm never going to let you live it down. And that in its own right is very painful and really hurts people, and is extremely toxic behavior. It can also be used when you tell somebody something private that you confide in them, and then they use that against you as well, and that becomes forever ammunition when you thought you said it in a way where you were talking to your spouse, significant other, and they end up using that against you to fight you later on down the road. Marina, you're awesome. Ashley, thank you for taking your free time to help us. God bless you. Well, thank you, Marina, so much for reaching out. I appreciate all of you tuning in. Thank you so much. We'll be back we'll be back this Saturday with the radio show live at 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. And we do the radio show, which is a USA Radios Network, Westwood One radio show. We do the live Facebook, YouTube feed. And then we'll be back next Thursday for this live show again, and we will put up the times and stuff way before, so we don't have to do this change in time at the last minute. Stu, episode idea: how to identify or cultivate a healthy relationship with others. I like that, and that's a great one too. I'll write that down. It's always great listening to your show. Thank you, Stu, so much for tuning in. And yes, I'll write down some of these concepts. I think these are great. And how to identify and cultivate a healthy relationship, and that's great, and that's part of it. And then BPD siblings, dealing with the family dynamic. These are great concepts. We'll work on those, because we're wanting to find healthy relationship work that we need to do, and follow what we need to do, and exited the patterns that we've created that have caused us any sort of negativity in our life. If please share this channel with any friends and family that you have. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership option on YouTube, which is cool. There's some, deeper dives on some videos and such like that. And then actually the TV show From the Celebrity Perspective on Amazon Prime, all the episodes are there. Most of them are up there. We're putting the rest of them up there soon from season 1 from Amazon Prime. So they'll be up there as well as an option when you are a member too. But in the meantime, new content out tomorrow on YouTube on how to stop thinking about them after a breakup. And also, if you have any other content ideas, please let me know. And I will come up with some video content for you and address any of the stuff that you want me to address, because that's important to me. So thank you so much for tuning in. see you on Saturday for the radio show. See you next Thursday for this live show. Maybe we'll call it Q and Ashley. I don't know. Maybe that might work. Q&A, Q and Ashley, something like that. So maybe we'll call it that. And then I appreciate answering your questions. I think this is a lot better than me rattling on about something. So I appreciate it. Have a great one. Let me know if y'all need anything. Much love. And don't forget, you know it, to live your true life. See y'all later.